the special teams this year, from what I'm looking at, punter back, field goal kicker back, best return man in the nation back. Wow.
Once again, probably the best unit in the Big Ten. I mean, I don't know how
Yeah,
you can argue
or
against it.
beyond.
And it was Reese Dakin's first year last year. I thought he improved as the year went on, but I think he can get better. And Drew Stevens is set. I mean, I know, hey, all these guys on the special, every one of those guys probably could have left and gone somewhere, not necessarily all the NFL. I don't know what Drew's stock would have been in the league, but guys are getting poached from every school now. If you have halfway decent numbers at any level, you're getting poached. So I guarantee you, all three of those guys have had offers and opportunities to go elsewhere. Now, Caden Weegan wasn't going to play in the league, but there's plenty of schools, even the Blue Bloods, that would have probably loved to have given Caden Weegan a scholarship just to be their return guy. He was that good. He was the best return guy in the country. And Drew Stevens, by the numbers, man, they tested him more from 50 plus than I would have ever expected. And he really didn't miss anything from inside of 50. So I'm anxious to see. Obviously, the offense being better sometimes takes away from the kicking needs to some extent. But he's a special kicker. He's a special player. He's coming off of an injury. My understanding is that he got dinged up a little bit during winter conditioning. But I think he's back up to speed now in advance of spring practice. I think the bigger question for special teams, Mark, is going to be depth. Who's the backup kicker? Of course, they lost their backup during this past season. He kind of got poached. I laugh about that every time I think about Syracuse poaching him off the roster, but that's what happened. And can you have some development behind Caden? I don't know who the next return guy is. He's one of the only guys that really said, "Hey, I'm coming back." He and Logan Jones, I believe. I know Jennings Dunker's back, but we expected him back. He and Logan Jones are really the only guys that shocked me that said they were coming back. Aaron Graves, same thing. But I don't know who the next return guy is. If they can figure out a backup option, and maybe it's a situation where he's probably going to do both. But if they want to get him involved with offense more, maybe you just run him on punt return duties. We've seen a lot of injuries over the past decade with guys returning kicks. There's fewer kicks to be returned anyways. So maybe you have somebody else ready to do that. That would be my question. Could it be a Jalen Watson or maybe a Seth Anderson or someone like that has got some speed? They're obviously two different skills. He's good at both. And I just think depth is the biggest question. But typically Iowa stays healthy at those positions, but return guy would probably be the biggest question mark. And again, as I mentioned, Drew's been dinged up a little bit. It sounds like he's back healthy now. Let's pull up the special teams. Let's pull up the roster. All right. Who do you want to talk about? You want to talk about Gunners? You want to talk about
I want to
Gunners?
talk about the best return man in college football.
All right. What else is there to say? Caden Weegan won the return man of the year. I think Brevin Dahl has a chance of working into special teams this year. He may be a guy to look for return duties, because I don't know. Who knows what Omar Young? Hey, we can connect these stories. Omar Young's going to be taking over the running backs room, and Brevin Dahl is a running back who's sounds like he's worked some at receiver.
For as good as Dakin is, he's not a Tory Taylor.
Numbers wise, no. But I think he's consistency wise, that's probably where he's got the biggest curve. I think leg strength is pretty close. But I mean, it's hard to. You're talking Tory Taylor may be an all-time great. It's him and Reggie Roby at the top. I don't think there's anybody else in the conversation really for best punter of all time at Iowa. That's how good he was. So it'd be hard to duplicate that. But he's got some of the physical traits. He's a big kid. I don't know that he's quite as big as Tory, but he is a big kid. Tory also got here when he was like 24 years old. So, there's a 6-year difference. There's a big gap between an athlete at 18 and an athlete at 24. I think that's a factor. So who knows what, he's been working. He's one of those guys. I'll be curious to see what he looks like this spring. How much did winter help him? And then in the fall, we don't often say that with punters, but I'm curious. How much weight does Reese Dakin put on from, it might be the only time in the history of the show we'll ever talk about monitoring the weight of a punter. But I am sort of curious because of Tory Taylor's physicality that he brought, even as a punter.
Now, this analysis may be horribly skewed because I am not. I watch the punting game of all these teams just like I do every other play of the game, but I'm not sitting there with quite the analytical eye. But Torrey Taylor is about the best I've ever seen anywhere.
But you watched Reggie Roby back in the day. I mean, he was special. I didn't watch him live.
I don't remember him hitting those kicks at like the 3-yard line like Taylor did over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an unbelievable skill. And it is an unbelievable skill to be able to get kicks. You're talking, I don't know if you're talking about coffin corner.
Yeah,
Punts,
or timing with his special
exactly.
teams unit,
Yes.
which is a credit to them as well. All the balls that were caught in the air or on one bounce.
And being able to time that, I think, generation wise with, or era wise with Cooper DeJean, because I think Cooper's, we don't talk about gunners, but if you talk about, he's got to be one of the best gunners of all time at Iowa. And I don't even know the Eagles are using him in that manner. I would hope they are. Gary Close could probably tell us, but whatever they're doing, it worked because they're Super Bowl champions. But boy, his skills as a gunner were unbelievable as well. Do you still abide by the fact that it was that you think this was an illegal, invalid signal? Do you still abide by that?
Who said I abided by that?
You argued when after that whole thing happened, you sort of argued that he shouldn't have been waving his hand.
I
And
just didn't get it. I
I
was like,
just said
what is he doing?
he was running towards the ball.
Like this?
Yes. He wasn't running like this. Nobody's going to run towards the
I
ball.
don't believe it should have been called.
Okay.
I don't remember
right.
exactly the argument or lack thereof that we had. I know that I did provide some pushback. It was just
It was it was a little odd, but it should have never been called back. Nobody on the field, nobody on the sidelines, nobody in the stadium thought it was a fair catch. Nobody, including Minnesota. The fact that they had to go back and review it is disgraceful. That you would go back and review that and call it that way.
And had he ran the ball out at the 1-yard line, it may not have been reviewed.
It wouldn't have been. You and I both know it wouldn't have been. Well, no, I'm even thinking if he had just ran the ball out right where he caught it, they wouldn't have gone back and reviewed it.
Well, regardless, I'm just making the point that if it was a non-scoring play,
right?
Yeah,
I don't even know how it's. I still don't know how it's reviewable. Just because he scored a touchdown,
they review every scoring play.
That's stupid.
No,
that is stupid.
That's just a rule. A guy could be plunging in from the 1-yard line. They just review it.
It's a stupid rule. It is a stupid rule. Just like if a guy ran 98 yards down the field and dropped at the 1, they're not going to review that. But if he runs 99 yards and goes to the end zone, we're going to review that. That's stupid. That is, it's stupid. It's stupid.
I understand the premise that they want to ensure that they're not screwing up a play that ended up in a touchdown.
A 98-yard play is responsible for the touchdown that happens on the following play. You and I both know that.
Well, yeah, but you can't regulate that. Okay, we're going to do every play over 20 yards or 30 yards, but not.
You can't? Well, then why are we doing it with touchdowns?
Why can't you regulate that? The same thing about an 18-yard pass down to the 1-yard line. How important was that? Well, it seems pretty important.
Right. So either review it or don't. I don't believe that you review scoring plays. I think there should be a premise in place for any play. If something meets a certain criteria, it can be reviewed at any point in the game. Or
you're being pretty vague.
Final two.
What criteria? A certain criteria.
Certain criteria, but D. Rollison says I'm triggering him. The bottom line is there's no way you can possibly call that a fair catch. And there's no way it should have been reviewed in the first place. But my whole point is we shouldn't be reviewing every scoring play. If we're not able to review other massive plays like a 98-yard catch and duck out at the 1-yard line, you should not just have some arbitrary rule that says we're reviewing every single scoring play. A guy runs it in from the half-yard line, clearly is in, and we're going to look at it just to make sure. And we didn't review the 98-yard pass play the play before. What sense does that make?
When you make rules sometimes, Corey, I think you will agree with this. You don't have the advantage of seeing into the future. You have to make the rule as applicable as possible. You can't say, well, officials determine, was that 18-yard pass important, or was that 7-yard run important or not important? You can't like
Well, I'll tell
make
you
it.
this. I'll tell you this. We can talk about that aspect of the rule, but we can also talk about how reviewing a fair catch is even reviewable when it wasn't called on the field of play. Why is that an aspect of a scoring play that can be reviewed? Because I mean, I know there was the example of was it a North Carolina guy a couple years prior that had been called for an invalid signal, or maybe it was Wisconsin. One of those. It was a game, Power Four game, and I remember looking at that after the fact. But that wasn't a scoring play. But it was called an invalid signal on the field, if I recall. So
Mhm.
I I, I don't know if did we ever get clearance, or did that ever get established why that was even a reviewable aspect of a play? Because typically you can't go back and call a flag on. It's like you can't go back if there was a pass interference on the play, Mark. A
Yeah.
guy catches a ball and is actually pushing off. The officials can't go back later after calling it a touchdown and say, "Well, it was actually an offensive pass interference," after a review. You see how stupid that is? You see how dumb that is? It's a judgment call in the moment. And if you don't call it that way on the field, it's not, you don't go back and review it later. It's not like a goaltend in basketball or basket interference. That's not what this is. Either change the premise of the rule, be very specific with each situation, which is difficult to do, I acknowledge, or just say we cannot go back and call a flag on a judgment call after the fact. That's just ridiculous. I don't care if it's a scoring play or not.
Well, I'm not capable of coming up with the correct term to differentiate judgment calls here, but I don't consider that like a left tackle made a hold on a pass play that you can say on a, we
What's the
we
difference?
obviously, I think we can all agree, we don't want officials going back on any play or scoring plays and making judgment calls on pass interference or holding calls or anything like that.
What's the difference? What is the difference? If everybody kept playing, what's the difference going back and saying, okay, how much was he moving his arm? How high from his waist was it? What is the difference with reviewing that versus reviewing how much a guy was wrapped around somebody's shoulder pads, or how much a guy pushed off? And okay, was there hand checking? Did the defender turn his head? Like, what's the difference? Judgment call wise, what's the difference?
Everything would be a judgment call excluding offsides.
Okay.
And what else?
Well, they are. That's why you don't
Practically
go
every
back and
rule
review
in the
judgment
book
calls.
has some level of judgment call, except for, yeah, offsides, illegal procedure, any kind of motion penalty. That's not a judgment call. It can be clearly seen and determined, but everything else is there's a gray area of holding penalties, of pass interference penalties, where there's a threshold for that individual official.
So I still don't understand how you can go back and review a penalty. I just I don't understand a non-penalty, a non-called penalty. I don't even particularly like it when I see a call in football. And this happened a lot this year. When I see a call in football, a flag thrown, and they show the replay on the television screen right away, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's there, but and then they say the flag was picked up. There is no foul for illegal block in the back. It's like, well, you threw the flag. It's not like you like the flag fell out of your pocket. You called it. You threw the flag
Sure.
because you saw something, and then for some reason, maybe you want to say another referee saw it from a better angle, but you've decided, yeah, never mind. It wasn't enough. Like, no, that's not how this should work.
Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. I do agree. Hang on. It does sound funny when an official says there is no foul for such and such, because obviously they're acknowledging somebody saw
Yeah.
whatever I'm just
Unless it's
stating.
something like grounding where they make an explanation, the passer was outside the pocket or whatever it is. If
Sure.
there's an explanation that they clearly got from another official, like, no, he was here. Okay, you saw it wrong. That's fine. But you can't decide, like, let me go back in my memory 5 seconds. Oh, I saw that wrong. Now that I see it in my head, I saw that wrong. So I'm going to change the call. Like, you saw what you saw. It moved you to make a call. Don't be picking up the flag because it just loses. To me, you lose trustworthiness at that point.